This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Former President Ronald Reagan's name came up today in the investigation of mismanagement and political corruption during the 1980s at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This came as Samuel Pierce, HUD Secretary for all 8 years of the Reagan-Bush administration, invoked his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination and refused to tell what he knows. Pierce was subpoenaed as a witness after refusing to appear voluntarily. CBS News correspondent Terrence Smith is covering the HUD scam case.
Silent Sam Pierce lived up to his nickname today, becoming only the third former cabinet member in history to plead the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination. Not since the scandal-plagued administration of Warren G. Harding has a cabinet-level official balked at participating in a congressional investigation. Pierce, with television cameras barred at his insistence, had been subpoenaed to resolve contradictions between his earlier testimony and that of former aides over his role in political influence peddling at HUD. Pierce complained that he had been prejudged and needed more time to prepare.
It's been 4 months since his last testimony. It defies logic that he needs more time.
After Pierce invoked the Fifth Amendment 8 times, his attorney attacked the committee's tactics.
What they wanted to do was rush him to judgment. They have wanted to try, convict, and sentence him, and we will not let that occur.
In its questioning of Pierce, the committee revealed for the first time that the political use of HUD funds during the Reagan era had reached directly into the White House and involved the former president himself. In a 1982 campaign swing in New Jersey for Senate candidate Millicent Fenwick, the president made this announcement.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development has advised me that they've agreed to approve Section 8 funding for 125 units of elderly housing at Park Place in Ewing, New Jersey.
An internal HUD memorandum indicates that Pierce was advised of the decision after the president was en route to New Jersey. Though the money was earmarked for another state, the White House had redirected the funds to help Ms. Fenwick's unsuccessful campaign.
And if you don't elect her senator, we'll take it away.
After Pierce's refusal to answer questions today, Republicans on the committee joined Democrats in calling for a special prosecutor to investigate possible criminality at HUD. Dan?
Terry, how serious is this revelation today involving President Reagan?
Well, it's obviously not going to improve his image in the history books because it makes clear for the first time that the politics that influenced decisions at HUD originated, some of it anyway, at the White House, and that the president himself was a willing participant. On the other hand, I don't suppose it'll surprise anyone at this point that there were politics involved at HUD.
Terrence Smith, thanks. The rhetoric and wrangling between President Bush and Democratic leaders in Congress over U.S. economic policy intensified today. President Bush said he will stick by his idea of lowering the capital gains tax and called a Democrat alternative plan unacceptable. Leslie Stahl reports on the struggle over political gains and capital gains.
It's war, all-out war, a fight between the Republicans and the Democrats over President Bush's plan to lower capital gains taxes.
Let's cut the capital gains tax.
The Republicans have an ad, and so do the Democrats.
George Bush wants you to subsidize his tax cut for the super rich. We think the choice is clear.
The capital gains sell. The White House was in high gear.
I think we have to stand up to the understandable political rhetoric on the other side, rhetoric that we heard all last year and are now hearing once again.
Small businessmen were invited to campaign for the president's plan at the White House as a demonstration that it doesn't just benefit the rich.
Unless we have capital, we can't grow and we can't supply the jobs within our own communities.
The other side, including consumer and labor groups, put its own warriors out front to insist that 80% of the capital gains tax break will go to families with incomes over $100,000 a year.
This vote is a critical test of whether the Congress is truly a representative body or whether it is a captive of big money lobbyists and the wealthy.
The Democrats have an alternative, higher income taxes for the wealthy, along with restored deductions for individual retirement accounts. But several conservative Southern Democrats are siding with the president, and so are timber state liberals, because Mr. Bush's plan would benefit that industry.
The president was on the phone today lobbying House members for the vote later this week. Mr. Bush is so determined to win this, he says he'll keep up the fight even if it triggers across-the-board budget cuts in domestic and defense programs. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, the White House.
2 Americans were ambushed and murdered in the Philippines today, just a few hours before Vice President Quayle arrived in the country for a tour of U.S. military bases. William Thompson and Donald Buckner were retired U.S. Air Force officers working for a defense contractor at a U.S. facility north of Manila. Bill Whitaker has our report.
Investigators say the 2 Americans never had a chance. All that's left tonight are circles on the ground where 74 M14 and M16 rifle shell casings were found.
The 2 doors on the driver and the passenger side were open. The windshield is riddled with bullet holes. And I saw the 2 Americans slumped on their seat, all splattered with blood.
Their assailants are believed to be members of the New People's Army, the communist rebels suspected of murdering U.S. Army Colonel Nick Rowe in Manila last April.
Obviously, we deplore this senseless and cowardly act of terrorism. Acts like this will not deter us from our resolve to support the democratic government in the Philippines.
The killings came just hours before Vice President Dan Quayle touched down in Manila for informal talks with President Aquino on the future of American military bases here. The lease on Giant Clark Air Force Base and Subic Bay Naval Facility runs out in 1991.
Now that we're approaching the very serious negotiations over renewal of the base treaty, that everyone will be watching even more closely what the guerrilla insurgency is doing.
The communist guerrillas are not the only ones who want American bases out. Hundreds of protesters descended on the Manila airport this evening as Vice President Quayle arrived. Police, clad in riot gear, secured the area, but the protesters moved down the street to make sure their message was not missed by the Vice President's motorcade. The Vice President is scheduled to meet with President Aquino in a few hours. These latest attacks on Americans are expected to intensify their talks on U.S. forces here. And police have stepped up security, taking last evening's murders as fair warning. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Manila.
Still to come on the CBS Evening News, Aaron Hayes reports on South Carolina country people hard hit by the hurricane and hard to help. And Martha Teichner on the rickety U.S. air war on the drug barons of Bolivia. Weary South Carolina finally got a break in the weather today. The heavy rains of the last couple of days eased up somewhat, and in Charleston, where the full fury of Hurricane Hugo was felt so savagely 5 days ago, they were at least able to start in earnest the job of trying to put the pieces back together. The Defense Department dispatched about 435 Army engineers to help clear roads and build bridges. A new relief distribution center was opened to handle tons of aid arriving from all around the country. And this afternoon, the fleet that fled Charleston Harbor before the hurricane sailed back into port. Outside of Charleston, help is much slower in coming, even though some of the rural areas are every bit as badly damaged as the city. Take the community of Awindaw, some 20 miles north of Charleston. Population about 250. Reporter Aaron Hayes is there.
He's got a generator, so this is tears of joy.
Reverend Annette Edwards is trying to hold her congregation together, a few hundred souls in rural South Carolina. 5 days after the hurricane hit, they're still trying to get help, patch roofs, find food.
I lost everything, house, clothes, everything.
At 11 this morning, the church had already run out of food.
I would love to just have it to give to them.
Try about 3 o'clock, and we'll try to give you some ice then.
For Edwards, it is hard to believe so little has come.
Where's the help? I don't know where the help is.
Some help did arrive. Most of it was from churches, but there was one shipment. A little milk, a few meals, some ice from the Red Cross.
We're dividing this up, I understand, among 4 different small separate feeding areas.
Did you get ice?
Yeah.
Is it enough?
Well, that's all they have, so we'll share this. You gotta do that.
All along the rural roads in the hurricane's path, people are trying to pull their lives back together alone. Neighbors aren't much help. They're in trouble too. From broken houses, twisted trailers, residents search for someone to help.
Nobody, I haven't even seen anybody.
The numbers of people hit aren't as high as in the city, but the damage is every bit as bad, in many cases worse. There are no National Guard troops here to clear out fallen trees. The power companies have concentrated on fixing things in town. The governor today called for a change in focus to get things moving here.
We do need to understand the breadth of the problem and to work in every community in South Carolina.
That would be welcome relief to Julia Armstrong and her 89-year-old mother. Their house is in ruins. Far off the main road, they've been unable to find anyone to help fix their roof, salvage the house.
Nobody from nowhere had been here. You're the first one been here. No one was here.
Authorities say they're doing their best, but some worry that the rural victims of Hurricane Hugo are just too far out of sight, not on the minds right now of those who can help, and so for a while may have to get by alone. Erin Hayes, CBS News, Awendaw, South Carolina.
Tomato juice and grapefruit juice measure up to prune juice. You get more of 7 important vitamins and minerals in a glass of great-tasting Sunsweet prune juice. Sunsweet. Here's to your health.
Colombia's drug and violence pushers are believed responsible for a murderous bombing in the port city of Cartagena overnight. The blast at a Hilton hotel there killed 2 doctors, wounded a 3rd, part of a group attending a Latin American medical convention. The Colombian bombing wave is only one facet of how hard it is to find and fight the drug criminals. CBS News correspondent Martha Teichner reports tonight from the dangerous backcountry of Bolivia, where U.S. drug enforcement agents of the DEA, are trying to cut the Bolivia connection.
By the time they land, it's too late. The drug traffickers have fled. In this operation, American DEA agents working with Bolivia's drug police have flown to the remotest part of the country, all the way to the Brazilian border, acting on a tip, expecting to find as much as 1.5 tons of cocaine. So close, but not close enough. What they found was food, still hot on the table, drug paraphernalia, a sophisticated radio, and guns. Signs traffickers have been here, but no cocaine. A lot of risk, not much reward.
First thing, we should have gotten this information immediately when we had it. We didn't have the ability then because we simply had the resources someplace else.
Inadequate resources. That's what the DEA's men complain is preventing them from winning the drug war in Bolivia. Right now, they have 1 transport plane available for operations and 5 helicopters, all of them older than the pilots who fly them. Routine repairs regularly cost them missions.
Anytime one of these aircraft goes down, that's just 5 people less plus equipment that can't operate out in the woods.
At any one time, the DEA can manage, at best, a handful of men and limited equipment in a country the size of Texas. So it has to play it smart, aim for targets that will hurt all levels of Bolivia's drug organizations, just to make a difference. In the next 2 weeks, the DEA will blow up 24 clandestine airstrips, a serious setback for traffickers. But even this has to be done in a makeshift way. The charges are made of ordinary fertilizer, because for the moment, the U.S. military cannot provide them with explosives. Santa Cruz, home of Bolivia's drug kingpins. They used to sell coca paste and base to the Colombians, but that's changed. Now the Bolivians are producing the finished product, street-ready cocaine, under the supervision of the Colombians. The DEA says that means the Colombians have moved in and intend to run the show.
It's very clear to us, and it has been for some time, that the Colombians are deeply involved in every major operation, every major cocaine operation in this country.
A man with ties to the Colombians is Jose Aliparada, a key Bolivian trafficker arrested 2 weeks ago. The DEA hustled him out of Santa Cruz to a maximum security prison, so he couldn't bribe his way out. After significant DEA successes, the drug lords are now beginning to put members of Bolivia's drug police on their payroll. They plant phony informants to lead the Americans on expensive wild goose chases. Now is a critical time for Bolivia. With enough resources, the DEA believes it can still beat the traffickers. But with time and a lot more money on their side, the drug rings are positioning themselves
so that Bolivia could replace Colombia as the home of the cocaine cartels. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Trinidad, Bolivia.
President Bush tonight accepted changes in funding and emphasis of his version of a plan to fight the drug abuse plague. The endorsement is for a Senate compromise plan that would, among other things, provide almost $1 billion more in resources than Mr. Bush originally asked, and cut a wide range of other federal programs to pay for it. Footnote tonight to the strange story of that bag of crack Mr. Bush held up during his anti-drug speech to the nation earlier this month. The crack, he said, had been seized in a drug deal right near the White House. Friday, Mr. Bush was forced to confirm published reports that law enforcement officials were asked by White House image makers to arrange a crack deal nearby just for the speech. Today, the alleged drug dealer, identified as Keith Jackson, was arrested and indicted on 5 drug-related charges. Also in Washington, the Commerce Department reported today that orders for so-called big-ticket durable goods were up 3.8% last month, biggest increase since December, brisk auto sales credited. Here in New York, a mistrial declared in the Beech-Nut Company baby juice trial today. The federal court jury was deadlocked in the case of a former Beech-Nut president accused of marketing phony apple juice for babies. In 1987, Beech-Nut, the company itself, pleaded guilty and paid a $2.1 million fine. Top communist leaders held a news conference today, 1 week before the country marks the 40th anniversary of its original communist revolution. As our man in Beijing, John Sheehan, reports, the leaders stuck to their very hard line against the movement for democracy that was crushed last spring.
It was Jiang Zemin's first appearance before the press since he became head of China's Communist Party 3 months ago. He refused to rule out using the death penalty against pro-democracy student leaders or to reveal how many people have been executed since the Tiananmen massacre. Jiang and the other leaders on the platform defended the killing of unarmed demonstrators last June.
We do not believe that there was any tragedy on Tiananmen Square. What actually happened on Tiananmen Square was a counter-revolutionary rebellion.
Jiang Zemin was easier on his predecessor, Zhao Ziang. The former head of the party was last seen in May paying a conciliatory visit to the hunger strikers on the square. He was later fired. Comrade Zhao made serious mistakes, said Jiang, but he does not have to fear for his life or his lifestyle.
Because he has a longer record than I do in serving the party, so he now enjoys even better treatment in life. For instance, he has higher salaries than I do.
Jiang is now the front runner in the power sweepstakes, but the leadership remains riddled with rivalries. Trying to project an image of unity, Supreme Leader Deng Xiaoping has ordered his subordinates to stop their squabbling. One thing the leaders had to agree on is that China cannot develop economically without remaining open to the world. The leaders want foreign tourists and investors to return to China, but the more the government tries to look stable while keeping the capital under martial law, the less stable the leadership appears. Today, under the watchful eyes of armed soldiers, a rain-soaked group of young pioneers at Tiananmen Square opened a week of ceremonies for the 40th anniversary of Communist China. All participants will be screened for loyalty and selected by their work units. One of the most obvious signs of government weakness is the fear that if the square is reopened to the general public, someone might do something in remembrance of the slaughtered students. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
The Soviet Union today matched President Bush's offer to reduce chemical weapons and said it would go even further. Foreign Minister Shevardnadze spoke to the United Nations where Mr. Bush made his proposal yesterday. Shevardnadze said Moscow is willing to radically reduce or completely destroy all its chemical weapons if the U.S. will do the same. A spokesman for President Bush called that a very constructive response. Introduction. Certainly not if you watch the late-night TV talk shows and hear the jokes. Not if you know anything about how America has been consumed by the hype and hoopla of celebrityhood. And certainly not if the name Zsa Zsa means anything to you. Jerry Bowen is our police beat reporter gone Hollywood.
I didn't do anything wrong. Zsa Zsa Gabor hasn't had this much airtime since she held down the center spot on Hollywood squares.
Nobody's here yet. I came too early. I'm so upset.
But this is not your everyday TV show. It's not even legitimate theater.
Everybody's charming at the jury.
Chances are, if this performance were funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, Jesse Helms might have pulled the plug by now.
Thank you. Hi, Sydney, darling.
And who designed your dress?
What this is American justice on display. The former Miss Hungary, the star of such film treasures as Queen of Outer Space, the self-proclaimed pal of Ron and Nancy Reagan, on trial for cop bashing, Beverly Hills cop bashing.
You could have pled guilty and the thing...
Why shall I say guilty when I'm not guilty?
Gabor was stopped this past summer by motorcycle cop Paul Kramer because her Rolls-Royce license tags had expired. There's no question she hit the officer.
Officer Kramer, as gently as you can, please take Miss Gabor's right hand and place it on your face where she struck you.
No question she was arrested and handcuffed like this. Zsa Zsa claims it was self-defense.
Because I was afraid of the police, they're going to shoot me.
How hard did you hit Officer Kramer?
Not hard enough.
But another officer at the scene claimed Zsa Zsa was downright abusive, tried to throw her weight around, even resorted to name-dropping.
She looked at me and said, I'll have your job. I'm calling the Reagans on this.
During the course of the trial, Zsa Zsa's been reduced to tears. Even fled the courtroom, as she did today, with husband number 8 on her arm.
Because I cannot listen to all those lies. I just cannot listen to the vulgarity and the lies.
Every arrival has been something of a fashion show, a chance to greet fans.
Midland, Texas. I know Texas. Well, I married 2 Texans.
And the price of justice at $2,000 taxpayer dollars a day has now reached the $24,000 mark. If convicted, Zsa Zsa faces up to 18 months in jail. It would be one of the longest runs of her career.
You think there's a movie of the week in this? I don't know.
Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Beverly Hills.
What can I say other than that's part of our world tonight? Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. See you tomorrow. Good night.
I'm Harry Smith.
And I'm Kathleen Sullivan. Tomorrow, America's love affair with the car.
The new cars, the classic cars, and future trends in automobiles. A 2-hour special
on CBS This Morning.
This is CBS.